Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources, hashtag how I got custody. So this video is about Tyrese, who says he wants to be a father's rights advocate. Hopefully this lands in his lap. I don't expect it to, but he's saying he's going to go out and, he got screwed in his divorce, all kinds of draconian child support and stuff like that. I don't know what the custody order is, but he should have got custody because there should be a default presumption that men get custody because they are the safest place for kids. But anyway, my point is that Tyrese is the next celebrity who's coming along saying, I got royally screwed and I want to do something. Alec Baldwin came along and wrote a book and then disappeared. There's an actor who came along like a year ago. He's like a B-list actor, and he's doing some stuff. And I told him his pursuit of changing laws isn't going to do anything. Then he blocks me because he thinks, I've been doing this 20 years. I got full custody of my daughter when she was 7 months old without a lawyer. I've helped thousands of dads do the same thing. And these people just come along and they're rookies in this game and they don't want to listen to a veteran. The problem is judges can do whatever they want as long as they rubber stamp the best interest of the child. We have great laws. If a parent alienates a child, if a parent abuses a child, if a parent neglects a child, if a parent abuses the use of conflict between the parents, if the parent coaches a child, they should not have custody. That's what it says in most laws. California 3020, FAM Code 3020B, Florida 6313, Washington RCW 269191. The mere abusive use of conflict, or if the mother has an emotional problem that interferes with the performance of parenting functions, you can get custody. That's what happened in not the Rideout case, Kovacs case in Washington, a Supreme Court case out of Washington State. So we got great laws in the books. What's the problem? Judges are bigoted toward fathers. Just like black people in the South in Jim Crow, during the Jim Crow times, they had the same due process rights as white people. Do you think they got fair rulings? No, because the judges or the jury, the prosecutor, maybe your own defense attorney is in the Klan. There's a culture of bigotry that pervades through the courts. So how do we fix that? Number one solution to fixing the court system is firing the judges when they make bad rulings. But the problem is you vote a judge in usually every 4 years. And nobody knows who a judge is or what the issues are or where to stand. But if people went on a campaign and say, this judge placed children with a child molester, this judge places children with a blind mother who got the child got burned on the oven because the blind mother wasn't paying attention and the seeing dad didn't get custody. Things like that, which are actual cases I've dealt with. I had a case where the dad had custody. He went to jail because he was falsely accused of domestic violence by the mom. That case was dropped. In the meantime, she took custody, and then she went to court, an emergency order, got full custody, and she lived with a boyfriend who was a drug dealer, possessed heroin, cocaine, and was a registered sex offender. And you know what the guardian ad litem and the judge said? Just don't leave the kids alone with the registered sex offender. The law says that if you live with somebody in Washington, the law says if you live with somebody who has a sex offense or has abused kids, it's mandatory to put restrictions on them. But they made an exception to it. Judges do whatever they want. So you have to fire them, vote them out. Just like if you work at McDonald's and you don't make the fries fresh and hot and the customers keep complaining, you will get fired. So you'll do a better job if you're reprimanded or threatened that you're going to lose the job. Now, judges want to keep their cush jobs and sit on the bench and be God in that courtroom for, 20 years and retire. Or some of them retire early and they become a mediator. But they don't want to be humiliated and voted out. So if there's campaigns that say, this judge made this ruling and that ruling and that ruling in family court, vote him out. He's destroying families. He's trafficking children. He's giving kids custody to, like in the case where the toxic chick I dealt with, Lorena Harris. She's got 50-50, and she beat the snot out of her kids, whipped them with a phone cord, put them outside in the rain with no shoes and no coat. Then, eventually, her 15-year-old, she bit her in the neck and tore skin off and punched her and gave her concussion. And then now she allows her 5-year-old to be around her boyfriend that beat the snot out of her twice in violation of a protection order. And then he caught felony cases. Then Lorena protected him and didn't show up for the felony trials or didn't cooperate with prosecutors, so those cases were dropped. And she told me she's worried that Brian molested the 5-year-old. And then when I break up with her, she's right back with Brian, the 5-year-old. And forces the 5-year-old around the guy she said molested her kid. That person should not be allowed. And then CPS had gotten involved, investigated her abuse for that kid and her son. She's still got the kid, as far as I know. So, Nothing's going to happen until people get fired for not doing their job. Stuff like this will continue to happen. Unless the judges are terrified, they will get fired. Once they're worried. Now, if you just vote a judge out and it's not publicly displayed that this judge makes bad rulings and places kids with sex offenders and all that other stuff, you have to specifically address what the issue is, because the next judge will just make bad rulings in family court unless they know specifically they were specifically fired or voted out for their bad family law rulings. So if you fire a judge for bad family law rulings and they get voted out, and it'll take years, because you don't get to fire them but every 4 years. But if they keep getting voted out, then people will start getting their act together. If politicians get voted out because they didn't do what the people said, then they'll get their act together and they'll start doing the policies of the people. 99% of people are against men competing against women in sports. Why are they still allowed to do it? Because the upper echelon of these small percentage of people that are put in place or pimped or controlled or bought off, they make the decisions to allow that to happen, while everybody else is outraged. Well, until everybody else stops participating in sports or stops funding them or makes enough noise, nothing's going to happen. Back in old Europe, if a judge took a bribe or did something wrong, they would fillet them and skin them alive. So judges would get their act together and follow the law. We're not going to be able to do something like that, and nobody wants to do that, but you can vote them out and scare them. When a judge puts a rapist out into society, like somebody gets convicted of rape and they give them an easy sentence and they put them out and they rape again, the news will put a mic in the judge's face the next day that they find out this guy raped again. They'll be in his driveway at his house, mic in his face. And what does the judge usually do? They sit there, they don't say a word, get in their car, the smoke blows over, or the story is a story for a few days and then it disappears. The judges live in a bubble that nobody could touch them, and they don't care what they do. They still get their job. They still make $150,000 a year, and they're still building their pension, and they still get to have a God complex and do whatever they want. It isn't until the Commission on Judicial Conduct will suspend them or whatever. But those are ex-judges and lawyers that are all in the club. They go to the same cocktail parties and wife-swapping parties and all kinds, and cocaine parties, literally. Like George Carlin, the comedian, said, it's a big club and you're not in it. So until we vote these people out, there was in Tacoma, Washington, and usually attorneys don't run against a sitting judge, so they go unopposed every time it's voting season. So if you have a campaign to fire them, that's what's going to change stuff. But it's going to take too much of an effort, and that's why these celebrities never stick around and never do anything. The only other thing that's going to change stuff, a lot of people say the Title 4D money, the states. Every time the state orders an order of child support, the federal government gives them a matching bonus. They order, I think Tyrese is ordered to pay $10,000 a month in child support. So state of California got $10,000 federal funding, just one time, $10,000 for that amount. And that goes into a pool, and then the judges and DSHS and CPS get together in these secret meetings and say, how are we going to divide up this $5 billion we got from the federal government? Well, we're the judges. We got you all the child support orders, so we're going to take 60% of that, and you guys could divide the rest. So the judges have a financial incentive to make sure that a rich person or a wealthy person doesn't get custody of their kid. So it's child trafficking. But so if you eliminate that Title 4D, maybe you'll change some of that. Everybody thinks that that's the solution. But they were giving custody to moms before Clinton passed Title 4D or introduced Title 4D. So you're dealing with the bigoted discrimination of people in court who don't care about the welfare of kids and the need of kids. And that's why you also need to go into court and argue the stuff I talk about, the best interest of the child and the statistics and the data and the judge's duty of care. And you got to do this. You're going to release people into society or kids in a bad situation, and that's not their best interest. And they're going to grow up and they're going to get messed up in the head. And look what we have now, all these out of wedlock kids and all these broken homes and all this dysfunction and kids gangbanging and criminality and kids struggling in school because the single mom experiment after 60 years didn't work. That's what I'm saying. Let's do a presumption of custody to the father. The dads who don't really want the kids will just hand the kids over to the mother. So a rebuttal presumption that dad gets custody, and then The real deadbeats or the real bums give custody to the mom, unless the dad's convicted of DUIs, child abuse, child molestation. Of course, in those cases, when I did that video on TikTok, women went crazy. They're like, "How dare you? How this and that?" All I was asking for them to do a 60-year experiment with fathers getting custody. Women are all about equality. You guys had your little run. It utterly failed. Why don't you give us a little run? But see, nobody even thinks like this. Nobody. Remember, I just a few minutes ago, I just told you the news will come to a judge's home and stick a mic in his face when he's getting in his car. You guys are scared to protest. Like, you guys see pictures of me protesting my judge in front of his home. Oh my God, you didn't get arrested? It's a free freaking country. Everybody's scared to do this stuff and to change things and to get on the offensive and to protest and to disturb these judges' bubble. But as long as they're in this bubble, nothing's going to happen. They have discretion to do whatever is in the best interest of the child that they think is in the best interest of the child. We've seen them. You've all seen. All of you have been in cases. You have overwhelming evidence that you're a better parent. The other parent's crazy. She's an alcoholic. She's mentally ill. She was suicidal. She says she's going to blow up the house, the kids, and you. She committed domestic violence. Women commit the vast majority of domestic violence and physical child abuse. 60%, maybe even more because it's so underreported, the domestic violence. And then 90% of the child molesters are the stepdad or the new boyfriend they bring in their lives. Now, I know a bunch of great single mothers. I know some single mothers who are struggling and getting used and abused and manipulated and railroaded in a family court by a narcissist husband. So that's why I got suckered by that psycho chick last year, because she had me convinced that all her baby's dads were crazy. But all her baby's dads now, except for, well, not her baby's dads, but all the violent, crazy people around her get to still tap it and give her money and send her cash apps and do whatever. And then I got some guy, probably one of her goons, on here talking about I'm obsessed because I want some accountability and I'm suing for my money back. Anyway, everybody thinks that women are always victims, men are always the bad guy, and like I said, even as a father's rights advocate, I got suckered. But I knew that chick as a friend for like 8 years. She just put up a good show for a while, like any narcissist does. So, and yeah, I'm stupid for even engaging in a relationship. This is the one person in the world I wish I never would have met at all, ever. Even my baby's mom, I don't wish I never would have met her. We had good times before, but this is one human being I wish I never would have met. So, lesson learned. And so, the judges are untouchable. They think custody to win. And they're brainwashed too. So, when you go into court and you argue the stuff I'm talking about, the science, the data, the judge's obligation to the child, the judge's allegiance to the child, the judge's duty of care, the code of judicial conduct, the oath of the judge, all these things that nobody even attempts to argue. If everybody flooded the court with these arguments, then the culture might change and you might wake people up. But the hardcore way of waking a judge up is like, you're going to get fired if you keep making these bad rulings. And actually, I've actually changed some judges' MOs and rulings when I put on my website or when I've been out protesting and I have it on my sign. I will say, this judge gives custody to blind mother who gets children burned, or says that seeing dad is not as good as blind mother gets kids burned. This judge gave children to somebody who abused children. This judge gives children to sex offenders because the mother is dating a sex offender and they give custody to the mother, so the child's forced to be around a sex offender, which is a violation of the law because it's mandatory. They put restrictions on that. There's an exception in Washington, RCW 2609-191-2N, which is an exception to 2B, where they said, okay, sex offender, child abuse, molestation, mandatory restrictions on a person or a dad. But there's an exception. If you prove that exception, then they could but so the judges always have an out. I think some people think that if they get 50-50 laws going, or they talk about that all the time, that'll fix stuff. There will always be laws, even if there's 50-50 presumption laws. There will always, unless there's abuse, unless there's domestic violence. And there's 3 states that have 50-50 laws now. It's not changing anything because women just lie even more than they used to. You see, all this change the law stuff is bullcrap. Nobody uses their brain and thinks for a second, if I change this law, what's going to happen? There's like, change the law, change the law. Emotionally triggered reactions with no thought or thinking. Like I said, I've been doing this 20 years. The people who made Divorce Corp, the greatest documentary on how corrupt the system is, all them were going to come in and change the system. They kept having meetings in Washington, D.C. with politicians and this board and that board. And I told Joe Sorgi, You're wasting your time. It's not going to work. He wrote back, well, this is what worked in Europe and this is what we're going to try and do. I said, you're wasting your time. It's not going to work. Who's here now? I'm still here helping dads fight and win in court. Joe Sorgi fell off the face of this earth. We have to change the culture, change the hearts of the judge, or fire them. Otherwise, things are never changing, and being an advocate is a waste.